You ever have one of those days where someone in a pastel suit with a golf club decides they own your life? That was my Tuesday. Move this junk, or I'll have it compacted into a cube with you still inside. That's what she said right there at the gate. Her voice was sharp enough to slice through the mountain air. I just kept looking down, pretending to care about the dirt caked on my old Ford's hood, while she tapped her $1,000 graphite club like she was keeping time for my execution. When I finally looked up, I saw Meredith Thornfield. She didn't look like a person, not really, more like the logo for a bank, if a bank could sneer. Immaculate light blue suit hair so lacquered a tornado wouldn't budge it, standing before the rusted iron gate that had marked the edge of my family's land since the 1800s. Behind her, a G-Wagon sparkled in the sun, probably worth more than every truck that had ever broken down in this valley. She looked at me, at my muddy boots, my frayed jacket, 3 days of stubble, and decided I was debris. Some squatter, maybe a loser nephew who'd lucked into a plot of land. What she couldn't see was a guy whose name matched the one carved into the old gate, whose blood was probably still somewhere in this soil. And the citation for 50 grand she'd just chucked into my window. She thought it was a death sentence. She had no idea she'd just started digging her own grave. I didn't say a word. Just let the silence grow. Folks like Meredith folks who need the world loud and full of their rules can't stand silence. After a moment, her mask cracked. She spun around and stormed back to her SUV, heels stabbing the gravel. I watched her go, and I made a promise right then she'd started this war, but I'd be the one to finish it. See, most people look at a few thousand acres of Wyoming timberland and see some Hallmark postcard, pretty pine sunset over water, all that. Me, I see vectors, elevations, legal boundaries that matter more than fences. 15 years working as a federal surveyor does that. My uncle didn't leave me this ranch so I could retire. He left it because he knew someday someone like Meredith would show up, and I'd be the only one in the family with the stomach to fight back. I rolled the truck forward, gravel popping under the tires, and headed for the old cabin. Smelled like cedar smoke and dust, just like it always did when I was a kid. I dropped my gear inside cases full of old survey tools and a LiDAR scanner that could see through trees and lies. My plan wasn't nostalgia. My plan was war. First step, maps. I'd already pulled the satellite shots. When I zoomed in on the east border, the blank space wasn't blank. The Emerald Waters Estates. Meredith's personal fiefdom was spreading out, eating up green with roads, fake lakes, and a clubhouse big enough for a Vegas wedding. The county record said their border hugged my line, but the satellite didn't lie. Their shore road curved where it shouldn't. My gut said they'd gone too far, so I grabbed my keys and headed for the border. 20 minutes of bouncing over old fire roads later, the trees broke and I nearly drove straight into a white vinyl fence so bright it gave me a headache. Beyond it, the world looked like a TV set. Chemically green grass, a clubhouse that was really just a marble monstrosity with boats docked everywhere on water that should have been mine. This wasn't just a neighbor building too close. This was an invasion. I snapped photos of the dock of the foundation of a sign claiming a private nature trail that ran right onto my side. That's when I heard the shout golf cart charging my way, 2 rent-a-cops in tactical vests that made their polos look extra ridiculous. Meredith hot on their heels. She didn't want her goons to handle me. She wanted the kill. She let loose about bylaws and maintenance easements, about my visual pollutant of a truck, about how they owned the lake, the trail, the land, the air. She smacked a cease and desist onto the fence and handed me a bill for another $500 doubling every day. And then she leaned in and claimed on camera that the Emerald Waters HOA owned the water, the shore. Everything. She was so sure of herself, she confessed to federal land fraud right into my recorder. Didn't even argue. I just took the paperwork and walked. She figured she'd crushed me. She had no idea she'd just signed her own arrest warrant. That night, I tore up the cabin floor looking for my uncle's old lockbox. The whiskey was gone, but the real treasure was still there. A land patent from 1887 signed by President Cleveland. Federal land patent, the nuclear bomb of property law. Not a regular deed, this thing granted absolute ownership, water and all, before Wyoming was even a state. No modern restrictions, no easements, just pure original title. That wasn't all. Old survey maps from 1962 showed something else. The Emerald Waters clubhouse kitchen septic tanks. Everything was 40 feet onto crossland. They'd buried the markers and built on top, hoping no one would check. And there was more a note on the map, North Marsh Protected Wetland. But the HOA had hundreds of homes, and the treatment plant couldn't possibly handle all the waste. Midnight. I grabbed my jacket and a thermal camera, hiked to the marsh, and flipped it on. Through the viewfinder, a glowing pipeline ran from the clubhouse right into my land raw sewage kitchen gray water, the works pumping straight into a federal wetland. They were using my inheritance as their personal sewer. That was more than trespassing. That was felony-level environmental crime. At 8 a.m., the attack started. Flatbed trucks, cranes, boulders dropped across my only road out. Meredith, arms crossed, lawyer at her side, smug as could be. She told me I was landlocked. Hit me with a $50,000 lien, threatened foreclosure. Told me I had 48 hours before they cut the power. She thought she'd won. I didn't call a lawyer. I called the Army Corps of Engineers, a buddy named Colonel Vance. Gave him the thermal scans, told him about the patent. He whistled. That's federal water, not a civil dispute anymore. We'll be there in the morning. That night, while Meredith and her cronies toasted to my destruction, I took the LiDAR and marked every inch of the real boundary iron stakes, bright orange, cutting through their putting green pool and her precious rose garden. And that's when Ara Vance, board treasurer, nervous as a cat, found me. She handed over a folder, proof of embezzlement, shell companies, fraud, and most chilling, a plan to torch my cabin with me inside if all else failed. She was done being a pawn. Morning broke. Black government Suburbans and hazmat vans rolled in. Colonel Vance and a U.S. Marshal shook my hand, then followed me to the clubhouse where Meredith was riling up the HOA for one last stand, talking about crushing the squatter. We walked in. 300 people fell silent. I plugged in my drive and let the data speak. Scans of the land proof of the encroachment, thermal video of the sewage pipe, banking records of stolen HOA funds. $50,000 a day for 15 years. The room went from gasps to fury. Meredith's husband lunged at me, got face-planted by the marshal. Meredith tried to protest, but nobody was listening anymore. Higgins cuffed her on stage, reading off wire fraud, money laundering, environmental felonies. The residents stared, waiting for me to be the villain. I wasn't. The clubhouse comes down, the pipe gets dug up, the wetlands get fixed, the homes those stay. Here's a lease, 99 years, $1 a year. But the HOA, it's gone. A conservation trust takes over. No more fences. A wave of relief broke over the crowd. No cheers, just quiet, raw gratitude. 6 months later, the clubhouse was gone. EPA found the ground poisoned. Remediation bankrupted what was left of the thornfields. Meredith and her husband, prison, 15 and 12 years. The judge called their crimes hubris bordering on pathology. Ara testified, secured immunity, and helped clean up the mess. The land started to heal almost overnight. We tore out the fake grass, let native sage and wild wheat come back. Wildlife corridors reopened, elk returned to graze. The air changed lighter, like the valley was breathing again. One May evening, Colonel Vance drove up, 2 beers in hand. "You did good, Sterling," he said, watching the red-winged blackbirds flock where the sewage pipe used to be. "You proved a point. You can't beat geometry. You can't beat history." I told him I was done fighting. Time to be a neighbor, maybe a grouchy one, but a neighbor. He laughed. "Well, if you ever get bored, the Corps could use you." He left, and I skipped a stone across the lake, 4 skips before it sank, the water finally fully mine again. See, Meredith thought she owned this place, thought her money and arrogance made her invincible. But the truth, none of us really own land. We're just caretakers. The land remembers. It forgives if you let it breathe. A week later, I signed papers to name the new wildlife corridor after Uncle Calloway. Justice isn't just about handcuffs or winning in court. Sometimes it's about making things right, restoring order, letting wildness back in. I wasn't mapping lines anymore, I was home. Sometimes to protect what you love, you have to draw a line in the dirt and stand your ground. So tell me, would you have let those neighbors stay, or would you have kicked them out? Where do you draw your line between justice and mercy? Share your story. I'll be here making sure the horizon stays wild.